So I'm delighted to start this session, which is Born Digital, Saving Data with Social Media and Web Archives, and to introduce our first speaker, George Oates, who's director of the Flickr Foundation. George is a designer and entrepreneur who's been working on the web since 1996. She has specialized in cultural heritage work for the last 18 years, working for clients like the British Museum, MoMA, Wellcome, and Het Nieuw Institute. She created the Museum in a Box company and most recently established the Flickr Foundation to run alongside Flickr.com to advocate for attention on preserving this unique collection. And with that, I'm delighted to give the floor to George for the first talk. George, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. I'm sitting down here so I can read my notes, so I hope you don't mind. Thanks, George, for inviting me to present. I'm really happy to be here to let you know about something that we're building at the Flickr Foundation, which is called Data Lifeboat. So for those of you who may not know, Flickr.com turned 21 years old in February this year. It contains tens of billions of images uploaded by millions of people, and it's one of our biggest visual culture collections on Earth. But it lives inside a corporation, and that means it's at risk. What you may not know is that a company called Verizon nearly deleted the Flickr.com archive in 2017. Luckily, it was saved by a little Californian company called SmugMug, and it's alive today. And as I put the idea of creating the foundation, Flickr.org, together, it was important to form an organization that didn't have a profit motive, that could sit alongside Flickr.com and figure out how to preserve a collection like this, or at least as much of it as we can, and make sure it's kept for the long term. Here's the team. We're a fairly small crew of designers and writers, builders. We also have a lot of advisors and research fellows and students coming through the organization, which is good. That keeps our questions nice and fresh. We also take a retro approach to our tech stack. We have 2 web servers on Alex's desk, and we're walking, not running, and we prefer, in general, lo-fi and light-touch tech solutions. The organization's laid out 4 programs. Today I'll be mostly talking about our content mobility program, which is about the journey of a digital image, where it comes from, what happens to it when it lands on Flickr.com, and where it goes after that. But before I do, I also wanted to make people aware of the Flickr Commons program, which has been running since about 2008 as a way for cultural institutions to share their photography collections into the huge audience that lives on Flickr.com. And you can see from those numbers that these photos are getting seen exponentially more than they would if they were living on a smaller content management system in your website. So if you have photography that you're interested to share with a big audience, please come and talk to me, because we'd love to invite you to join the Flickr Commons. And it's free. The company sponsors the membership costs for that. This photo that you see in the background was taken sometime in 1910. It now lives in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. And of course, it's the Krasinski Palace here in Warsaw. And just to give you a taste of what the Flickr community can do to photographs in the Flickr Commons, you can see an example here about how the community is enhancing the metadata about this image, even making corrections and adding information in a different language. And the Library of Congress team itself is also present in the conversation and chatting with the people who are helping. And in fact, this type of interactions resulted in the Library of Congress updating tens of thousands of its official catalogue records based on the feedback that it gets from the community, which in my mind is the best win. It's a bit like the artistic work we saw before, where conversations give you good information. And if we look back to Flickr, more contemporary pictures are also taken in the same place, like this one in 2017. And this comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland Flickr account, which has published almost 50,000 photos into Flickr.com. And honestly, there are photos of just about everywhere in Flickr. It's really an amazing set of images. This is my friend and peer, Trevor Owens, who said the other day that I don't think people appreciate the cultural significance of Flickr as a platform and also as a corpus. Well, the good news is that we at the Flickr Foundation do appreciate it, and we've constructed our mission to try to keep this unique corpus visible for 100 years. And that's kind of weird to say when you're talking about a technology situation. Depending on how you count, we're already about 20% done. And I don't mind where those photos live. That doesn't necessarily have to be on flickr.com, it could be elsewhere. Of course, the easiest way for us to achieve our mission is if flickr.com stays alive. But I like this 100-year framing because it also requires you to consider generations that haven't been born yet, that will come after you and operate along that same direction. And also, if your time frame is 100 years, technology questions kind of slide out of the frame a bit, because who knows what kind of servers we'll be buying in 2050 or what software we'll be doing or any of that stuff. And actually the question about the organisation is much more social. You know, how do we maintain a thread that new people can pick up, and how can they see what we were doing at this time here in 2025? And I've really enjoyed thinking like that as a software person. You don't often get the chance. So the big question is, what do we do if flickr.com goes down? Because as you're probably aware, loads of web services have died in the last 20 years, and often that means their content's deleted, just wiped off the face of the earth. But we want to take the chance to think about it before it happens. And our central challenge is that Flickr's too big to archive in one place. Today, there isn't a single archive or library on the planet that's capable of manoeuvring that kind of scale of technology. You know, it costs millions of dollars a year to maintain, hundreds of people. You know, it's inhabiting the Amazon Web Services stack at the moment. And there are millions of reasons why that's all really hard. But also, it's an active system, which is not traditionally seen in archives very much. It's maybe a bit old-fashioned, the photo sharing service. I mean, it's sort of usurped by Facebook and Instagram and even Messenger and stuff like that. But instead of a last-minute scramble to try to gather as many pictures as we can at the last minute when somebody gets the note that it's going down, you know, what can we do instead while the waters are calm to design something that's ready for when that happens? And it's not just one data lifeboat, but maybe millions of them that are created with intent. And let me just say quickly before I go too far, this work hasn't been done in isolation. We've been working on the idea for almost 18 months now, and in collaboration with all kinds of folks who work in the cultural heritage sector and technology areas. And certainly this work wouldn't be as strong if we hadn't done that. So just a shout out to all the folks who've helped us directly, some of which are in the Flickr Commons program, by the way. We're consciously trying to design an archival parcel that will be useful enough to be actually collected by a formal institution. So kind of the reverse of what we've been hearing already today. Okay, so today the piles of images and their metadata sometimes get passed around the internet and eaten by machines. People are grabbing whatever they can to feed AI programs. And, you know, we heard about this morning from Alec, you know, billions and billions of tokens, which are just minute pieces of information, get shoved into machines at a vast rate. But the pictures on Flickr have a kind of what we call social metadata that's created as the community interacts with the images. And it's the comments and tags and curation that happens every day. And that kind of thing is usually completely ignored when the images are consumed by machines, trying to guess what's in the picture. But we all know that that stuff is gold to people who are looking into the past, that contextual social information. So our challenge is to meaningfully preserve that special information. It's not enough just to store a bucket of JPEGs somewhere. We need to create structures to allow future readers to find and explore those records and to understand any social context like comments and faves and albums that grew around them after they were posted to Flickr. And this social context is a vital part of each photograph's history. and must be preserved alongside the visual data. So yeah, we're making this distinction between technical metadata and social metadata, where the technical stuff's kind of made at the point of creation, either by the camera or the scanner, that type of stuff. It has the date it was taken and, the camera settings and stuff like that. But the social metadata is the kind of information that's created on Flickr.com itself and only in Flickr.com, and we think that's super valuable. We're also beginning to work on a few generated description experiments, and I'm curious to talk to Harry about his work with the time machine AI stuff. That looks pretty cool. But you can imagine us adding to the metadata that's created also with named entities and geolocation and stuff like that. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to make the point that user-generated histories, so histories of millions of people, are kind of hiding in Flickr.com. They're hiding in plain sight. And we're super interested in the combination of time and place, that now in 20 years of collecting, as it were, there's all kinds of events that are represented in Flickr, like all of the Europeana events that Sebastian has so photographed so well over the last million years or so. But yeah, contemporary stuff, at-risk things, stuff that's already disappeared, urban planning, sort of longitudinal studies of things, even sort of botanical growth of plants and all that type of stuff. You can sort of start to see it when the collection gets this big and this old. Okay, so here's the first diagram. I'm just going to give you a moment to take this in. This is our strategy for the next few years. We're calling it Accessible Archives, and it's about understanding and supporting creating a digital image, maybe even to the extent of digitization resources or funds for a warm human body to sit in your organization and actually do the process of digitizing things. Then you've got the idea of publication of what we call the access copy, so maybe not the full fat, giant TIFF image. And then spending some time in Flickr.com, hoping for some of that juicy social metadata to come in. And then where do the photos go afterwards to be preserved somewhere else? Always coming back to this question, what if the service goes away? So I want to dive into the data lifeboat idea with you. There's somebody trying to break in. So here's a really simple representation of the workflow. Basically, a data lifeboat is a tool to archive just a sliver of Flickr pictures and their metadata. And we want anyone with a Flickr account, which is millions of people, we want anyone with a Flickr account to be able to generate one. And we want a data lifeboat to also contain other people's pictures. And that will be governed by authenticating with the Flickr.com service first, because that helps us determine which photos you have access to see. In practice, that might mean the data lifeboat that I create about Warsaw could be different to the data lifeboat that you create about Warsaw, because we might have different permissions to see different pictures. That's a really, really gnarly and knotty problem. Just like this actual diagram of the software, which I thought you might enjoy having a glance at. It's easy to simplify things when you're a designer, but really this is quite a complicated situation we're dealing with. But it's really fun as well. Okay, the other interesting thing I hope you agree is this idea of the creator of the data lifeboat being able to write a note to the future about why they decided to make this particular archival set. So as you're setting your data lifeboat up, we ask some questions about why you're doing it, who it's for, and what you know about the contents in the collection. And we've actually designed almost 20 questions which people can choose to engage with or not. There's going to be 3 required questions, which are more or less these ones. But then there's more detailed questions. For example, imagine your data lifeboat is unearthed 60 years from now. What would you want the person looking at it to know? Or what would you want them to know about you? Can you think of anything you wouldn't want that person to use this data lifeboat for? So this is in consultation with digital preservation experts and archivists who are often sort of lacking that kind of information when they have collections come to them, especially digital stuff, because digital archives are usually just boring buckets of JPEGs, with not much of that narrative which archivists know well. So let's step through an example. This is a really simple data lifeboat I made called Commons Smiles. It contains just 17 images from the Flickr Commons collection. Once a data lifeboat's made, I can download it just as a zip file. And when I unzip it, I find these files inside. Their images, their metadata, and what we call the viewer, which is our HTML equivalent of an archival cover sheet. Here's a list of all the files you can get. Sorry, that's a little bit small, but it's pretty simple, pretty lightweight. We've decided that HTML is the one true format. And you click on this thing called the README to get started. That opens up in your web browser locally. You don't need to be online. It's all operating on your machine. And let's have a look at what we're doing with this thing called the viewer. So this is kind of like the home page for the data lifeboat. And if I just kind of scroll down, that's the note from the data lifeboat creator. In this case, it's me. And you see I'm noting that this is one I made to just demo the idea. That's the bit about the why am I making this thing. And then we also include some stats about the whole set of things. We show popular tags, social metadata counts like views, comments, and how many people have contributed something to the lifeboat. And we also visualize them so you can see what you're dealing with from the very top level. Privacy and safety are concerns in the Flickr universe, so we want to make sure that if you download an archive that has private material or adult content or something like that, that you're aware as the creator of this thing that it's in there, and you should maybe take a little more care with it. And we also have a basic graph that shows you when the photos were taken. And here's and basically you can click around, so any of these blue things are links just like any other link on the web. So you actually sort of navigate within the archive itself, just in HTML. Here's a glimpse of an individual photo page where you can see we've simply laid out all the data available for that photo and also made it so you can click on stuff, facets and things. And for the nerds amongst us, we also stamp in all the JSON data. So if you want to process and parse JSON, you can, in case that's useful to you. So we've thought really hard about designing this thing to be self-contained, self-describing. So, if it was dug up in 60 years, it could be decipherable and legible. That's really important to us. It's also versatile. HTML is a very flexible situation to operate in, and it's much better than some proprietary thing that might die in a few years. It's really, really lo-fi and basic, which we like. And yeah, just to sort of begin to conclude, we have lots of partners in the American cultural sector, and of course we're worried about what's happening over there, particularly with regards to erasure of cultural information, but also all kinds of other data, scientific data, medical data, all kinds of stuff. And so when the current government chose to shut down USAID or USAID, which is a sort of global support organization, we decided to use the data lifeboat tool to archive all the USAID photographs. So we quickly made a set of about 200,000 photos from across about 100 different accounts. And you can see, so here's the cover sheet. And you can see this one has different image license types, mostly all rights reserved, but you can see there's also use of Creative Commons in there. So just as a viewer of this, as a viewer of this cover sheet, you don't have to process any data to sort of get a sense of the contents. And yeah, it's a fantastic collection of all the work of that organization performing around the world, including in Poland, by the way. Of course, we have the ubiquitous map of any geotagged stuff. But yeah, I wanted to note something else about the design. We're working on ways to help people who create or then use data lifeboats to understand what they're dealing with. You can see in the USAID collection there's a variety of licenses used across the set. And since we're not the account holders, we can only gather public photos as the kind of, Flickr.org team. But if we were socially connected in Flickr to the USAID teams, we might get access to a few more photos, like any that they've made semi-private or even private. I've actually made an Oates family data lifeboat with my actual family members in it, about a dozen of us. I forced them all to use it when Flickr first started. And we generally shared privately amongst the family group And it's turned out to be a lovely set of memories, a sliver of Flickr that I can put somewhere else and give to my cousins and my brother and sister. So yeah, if you're interested more to learn more about our work and the research that we've done and the challenges of what building something like this, which is quite complicated, means, and also where we're wanting to take it, please do check out the research report. We've linked to it on our blog recently, so you should just see it there. And also, we're going to do an alpha of the Data Lifeboat in probably late summer, we think, at this point. So please make a note of that URL, and if you'd like to give it a try, you're welcome to. You just need a Flickr account, and that's free if you want to just sign up and give it a go. And finally, just a time check. I think we're cool. Yep, great. So what happens next? That's the next question we're beginning to look at is, okay, so you've made these 10,000 data lifeboats of, a government losing its mind over in the United States. What do we want to do with those data lifeboats? Where should we put them? And, maybe you have this concept of a beach, which might be an informal sort of not managed situation like my laptop or my Dropbox account, somewhere that you are responsible for. But we're also developing the idea of a safe harbour network where data lifeboats could be docked at known locations to be managed and maintained for the very long term. It's kind of borrowing this technology called lots of copies keeps stuff safe, which is a really simple utility to basically sort of keep copies of stuff active and healthy. And we're drilling down into those gnarly challenges of what persistent privacy of social media materials looks like. So as soon as you dislocate a Flickr picture from its environment, what happens to the privacy settings that it had on Flickr.com? But I was really thrilled that the Indigenous data governance question was asked this morning. In case you haven't heard of it, there's some data principles for Indigenous data governance called the CARE principles. We're actually trying to design our software to align with both FAIR and CARE data principles. So that's really hard, but we think it's really important. But yeah, in my wildest dreams, the Safe Harbour Network has nodes in the great archives all over the world. The Flickr Foundation becomes more like a transmitter, where the cultural heritage we're now pouring into these huge online platforms owned by corporations can actually be taken care of by people who really understand what it means to keep something for a long time. I'm super excited that our very first proto-doc lives on the Internet Archive. It's only just very basic, but every little basic proof of concept is a good move in my opinion. So that's me done. I just wanted to say, the Safe Harbour Network is the next thing that we're trying to work on after we get the alpha online. So if you or your organisation is curious about what it means to collect social media, please come and have a chat. We want to help GLAMs around the world to archive social media because we genuinely believe that this is viable and interesting social information that you should be collecting. So thank you very much. Good to be here.
So much. Okay. Do you have the yeah, great. Thank you. Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, George, for that talk. I think it's really kind of dealing with the what if, but your last example really showed us that the what if is kind of here and now. So very important to be thinking about it. Thank you so much. We are going to go into your coffee break a little, but we will try and find some time between this and the keynote for you to have a break. But now I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, Marta Pierzchala from Muzeum Sztuki in Łódź. Marta works in the scientific documentation department at the museum, where she deals with the licensing and sale of reproductions for artwork from the collection and compilation of archive materials. Marta is interested in copyright issues as well as further research of artists' archives. So I am delighted to invite her, hopefully with slides. They should be coming. Yes, I'm delighted to invite Marta to the stage. So Marta, thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction. So I add to this that last year I coordinated an international project called Archives of the Future. So I'm excited to share some experience with you now. So we all know how it's done today, like, share, or subscribe. But how was it done 50 years ago by artists working across borders, defying censorship and using nothing but envelopes, postage stamps, and lists of addresses? The Archive of the Future is a project dedicated to researching and making available selected archive resources from two institutions, Muzeum Sztuki in Łódź and Artpool Art Research Center, currently operating as a separate department within the Central European Research Institute of Art History in Budapest. The part of the collection of the collaboration that ended 2024, two artistic archives were analyzed. Andrzej Partum's Poetry Bureau, founded in Warsaw in 1971, and Artpool, founded in 1979 in Budapest by György Galantai and Julia Klanicaj. Both archives were created in the same decade in the context of mail art and the private network of artists of the 70s and 80s, which provided an excellent opportunity to compare them in structure and content. Physically, the Artpool archive includes 300 linear meters of shelving. Partum's archive currently consists of 448 A4 folders, which in line takes about 5 meters. A usual practice of both archives artists was to organize the submitted materials into folders labeled with the sender's name, the name of the project, or the country of origin. The first part of the project included 2 studio visits in Budapest and Łódź, during which the team reviewed selected files and analyzed the themes, characters, geographies, and chronology contained therein. Second part of the project was a pop-up exhibition. The gallery space used modern interactive magic wall touchscreens, which preserved digital images of selected artifacts and materials created during the research, like video spots and photos of the research work. The final presentation took place in Platan Gallery in Budapest on the 5th and 7th of November. Before founding Poetry Bureau, Andrzej Partum had already published 5 volumes of poetry on his own. Soon he began sending his slogans and manifesto by post to a wide range of participants of the artistic network in Poland and abroad. His famous slogan, "You are ignorant of culture and art," reached both personally known and unknown artists, as well as official galleries and editorial offices. Did György Galantai received it? The beginning of the Artpool collection was the selection of objects and documents preserved after the authorities closed the chapel studio in 1973. It was an independent gallery and a studio run by Galantai for 4 years in the cemetery chapel in Balaton-Boglar. At that time, this space presented all new experimental forms of art, like conceptual, mail art, visual poetry, kinetic art, land art, and happenings. Andrzej Partum, born in 1938, and György Galantai, who is 3 years younger, have never met in person. They know each other only through a network of contacts to which they both happened to belong. Their collection developed in parallel in Warsaw and Budapest through correspondence and activity of network participants. Both Partum and Galantai collected materials that today allow us to tell unknown stories about unofficial artistic activities, independent exhibition, illegal production, and distribution of prints. the archives are also alternative records of art from the second half of the 20th century, showing global connections, anti-system aesthetic, interdisciplinarity, and experiments with form. For the artist's attitude, their lack of attendance and official events and cases of censorship, we can learn about the mechanism of state control and citizen and supervision of art. The interactive installation consisted of three 86-inch screens on which one could view digital version of archive materials. The interface allowed users to zoom in on details, watch videos and objects in 3D, and follow thematic categories. The experience was similar to using a giant smartphone, encouraging active and independent exploration of the content. Part of the project was the digitalization of selected collection from the Partum's archive, which previously did not have digital copies. Each project partner had to provide at least 50 reproductions of objects from their collection, described in 3 languages and assigned to jointly selected categories. Themes such as self-organization, freedom of language, male art, relationships, fluxes, ecology, identity, women's art, and interventions and manifestos reflected the key themes of the extracted from the archives. And as an example, ecology meant that artists adopted a global perspective with no boundaries, only with different time zones. Also described minimalism of means and handmade or ready-made works. In the Animal Manifesto 1980, Partum argues the superiority of nature over the development of a human technology and warns against technocracy as a threat to a human emotional development. The themes such as identity and feminism appeared in the numerous self-portraits preserved in folders which served as a self-analysis or examination of the relationship between a person and the medium transforming the image. Iwona Lemke, for example, stamped her works with a pirate ship and the inscription Woman's Art. Paweł Kwiek compared his passport photo with the photos he took at home, comparing his official and private image. During the time of state censorship and propaganda, artists reached for pictograms, jokes, and new alphabets. For example, My Touch is an alphabet made with a lipstick imprint by Eva Partum, an active member of an international mail art network and the founder of a gallery address in Łódź. So imagine for a moment that we are standing in the front of the magic wall. On the screen we see an enlarged black and white photographs documentation of Zbigniew Warpachowski performance Water. The category is ecology, accompanied by a brief description introducing to the history and the concept of the work. Additionally, details include technique, the place of origin, dimensions, and the name of the collection. Let's look at a second example. A comic strip featuring a photo of Partum and Jerzy Bereś alongside a thank you note from Gabor Todt for participating in the International Visual Text Congress, which Partum self-organized in 1977. This piece is tagged with 3 categories that often overlap. The author of this postcard joined us in person during the finissage and performed a spontaneous action of stamping and sticking on printouts of photos from Andrzej Partum's archive. The main principle of private archives was relation-based exchange. If an artist received something in the mail, he was obliged to respond. The artwork could not be purchased, it could only be received as a gift. For Georgi Galantai, the most important thing was contact with other artists. He was driven by curiosity about how other people live and think. In order to establish contact with Ray Johnson from New York, who was considered the father of the main art, he, for 20 following days, Galantai sent a different postcard documenting his work and activities to the address in America. In 1982, when in response Johnson sent his first drawings to Artpool, Galantai decided to transform, replicate, and distribute them to his mailing list under the name of Buddha Ray University, founded in Ray Johnson's honor. In addition to the video wall, we wanted to highlight each of the 11 categories in the gallery space in the form of a large and a small format prints. The exhibition, at the exhibition, we juxtapose reproductions of Ray Johnson's 5 letters with the net manifesto by a pair of Polish artists, Jarosław Kozłowski and Andrzej Kostołowski, who described in 9 points what the artistic network is and how it works, by this anticipating the internet. For Partum and Galantai, the archives were letters sent into the future to the next generations. They gave hope to maintain the continuity of the past and the future. By founding the Artpool Archive, Galantai announced the Manifesto of Active Archive, a place where materials will be multiplied by actively being worked on. The artist's intention was to share the resource and create new situation within it. The project was co-financed by Ministry of Culture and National Heritage under the Inspiring Culture program in amount of 94,000 zloty. The museum received additional funds for the Marshal Office of the Łódź Voivodeship. The Hungarian company Beck and Rosta supplied technology. The cost of a 3-day equipment rental with monitoring was €6,000. Muzeum Sztuki in Łódź was the first institution in Poland to use this technology to present archives. This allowed to present in one space physically separated materials stored in 2 countries. The digital exhibition format presented in a video wall allows for the reuse of developed materials, its expansion, or its integration into another exhibition. So let me finish with a final image. Galantai posed for the installation in a boxer pose, inspired by one of the photos documenting his first trip to Italy in 1979, where he met the performer and the collector Achille Cavellini. Their first meeting in Brescia was captured in 2 photos, which you can see on the right. By repeating the gesture in front of the magic wall screens, was the artist boxing with modern technology, testing its possibilities, or was he rather standing face to face with his own past, confronting the history he co-created and which was reminded to him in the new context? For more insight, please check our video and the full photo documentation created by Hava. The 15-minute film is featuring interviews with our artists, a report from the opening of the exhibition, and visit to the Artpool Archive. So, Partum once wrote that incomprehension of art gives an artist a chance of new response. So let it be some invitation to share your thoughts or any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marta. What a fantastic quotation and also image to end on. I hope that's something to take away. With apologies to George and Marta, we won't have time for questions now before the the keynote. So there is now 15 minutes for a coffee break, and then I invite you to join us back in the auditorium for the keynote, which will still start at 4. If you do have questions, I don't want to too boldly volunteer George and Marta, but they are here, and you can also come and find me and I can pass them on as well. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, and Marta and George, thank you once again.